Joining me today is former Mayor Bob Ulrich. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
So we're sitting in a facility on grounds that you played not a small part in making happen.
That's an accurate description.
And I want to dig into that. But first, happy birthday, sir! 90 years old as of about a week ago.
That's correct.
Any words of wisdom from the perch of 90?
Well, if I'd known I was going to live so long, maybe I'd have taken better care of myself.
That's good advice, though. I should start following that now. So let's go back in time and trace our way to where we are now. You came into becoming mayor at a time when it was a 50-50 split. Should we do this or not? There was no team at the time. What do you remember about the race when you defeated a mayor who was against the stadium and you being for it?
Well, actually, the die had been cast at the time that I came to the work for the city. And the city council had voted to proceed with the plans for the stadium, a very risky project, obviously. And the then mayor, Dr. Ed Cole, opposed it and was supporting any efforts to reverse the decision. And that didn't happen. It moved on. So I got here in the midst of just as ground was broken for the facility. And the community was very sharply divided about whether or not to go forward with this. Obviously, it was a very risky venture.
Yeah. And you supported other public endeavors like the pier and the Bayfront Center. Why was your philosophy to build these types of things in the city, despite the costs where others may have said, we don't want to spend the money?
In our case, a brief review of our urban community would reveal that, based on statistics, healthy urban communities contribute about 15 to 20% to the tax base. Our urban community at the time that I came to work for the city was contributing 1% to the tax base. That's all you really needed to know, that the urban community was not well economically. And so the idea of our administration was to achieve some economic vitality. And one of the ways that is done is for a community to take public funds and invest them in the private sector. We did that by way of a 5-point project, which was we renovated the Mahaffey Theater, changing the rake on the floors, the air conditioning systems, and the acoustics of the facility, building a garage, renovating the pier, and instituting the Bay Plaza project, which was a 6-block, essentially reclamation of 6 blocks of downtown, and annexing 1,100 acres north of St. Pete. It cost this community $1 billion, but with it came the foundation to move forward. And obviously, I didn't mention building the Trop, but that was certainly an integral part of it.
Sure. So it was a financial decision, ultimately, a lot more of a long-term view and an investment in the future versus a short-term cost-cutting view.
That's correct.
Yeah. And it's an important point, because a lot of times when you hear about making a deal with the team, people say, why should these owners get breaks? Is it really going to create jobs? How does it help our tax base? So, having sat on that side of the table, why is it fair to make a deal with a team to get them here? And how does it contribute in real ways to the economy?
Well, I think one of the things that we tend to miss is that the reason for a city is to improve the quality of life for its residents. And one of the ways that is done is we subsidize things like necessary services for its residents. What do I mean by that? I mean taking care of roads. I mean providing stormwater drainage. I mean providing a sewer system and other miscellaneous municipal services, which without a city don't get provided. And so I have a friend of mine who runs a water service in a rural part of Indiana because the farmers in the outlying districts don't get water except that he delivers it. They can get it from a well, but if you have a swimming pool, there's no way to get that much water out of your well. So he trucks water from the urban community to the rural community and fills up their water needs.
And I guess the difference in some of the examples are, the difference in some of the examples you gave are there's no owner. There's no private, when you think of a park or a sewer system, there isn't an owner of that who is running it as a for-profit enterprise. But is it fair to say the logic still holds that there's value being brought in by the team, there's public benefit in raising the quality of life by the team, and even though there's a private owner who's seeking profit behind that, it still makes sense to make a deal?
I'm not sure it made sense when we did it.
Okay.
Certainly it didn't make economic sense. You were building a $120 million facility on the backs of the public without any assurances whatsoever that there would be a Major League Baseball team here. So it was a very, very risky move. And we reached out and took it. And when I say we, the majority of people on both at the county level and at the city level agreed to bite the bullet.
Yeah.
And they did. And of course, it ultimately turned out, but it wasn't an immediate success in any respect.
Well, and you had said the die was cast. So if you had to place your odds at the time you took office, what would you have put the chances of a team coming in the next 5 years and maybe then pushing it to 10 years or 15 years? How confident were you that the team was going to happen?
I would say I was in the 60 to 70% area because I had dealt with Major League Baseball. I had dealt with ownership. I had seen other communities. We had 2 or 3 major league teams who were ready to move. And so I felt pretty good about it. And interestingly enough, the most encouragement I received from Major League ownership was from the owner of the Yankees. And he was the one that told me in a private conference, he said, "Don't worry, Bob, you'll get your team." Interesting. And I had other baseball owners telling me, "You need to find something else to do with the stadium because you're not going to get a team."
Interesting.
But George Steinbrenner was positive and spoke those very words to me.
Having him say that to you, having other owners say the opposite, seeing what Frank Morsani went through and his efforts, seeing the team almost come here and almost go to, and then end up, ultimately the first crack at it going down to Florida, to the Marlins. A lot of politics in the game.
Yes, and the baseball leadership was not straightforward. And they had promised Frank Morsani, as a matter of fact, a Florida franchise if he would give up his right to buy the Minnesota Twins, which he did. And when the time came to award Frank Morsani the baseball franchise, it wound up going to Miami. Yeah. And that wound up in a bunch of litigation, which it should have.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And speaking of Miami, the Rays in Miami, Florida seems to struggle. They end up being 1 and 2 in attendance. In Miami, is a tale of a group who built a stadium. It helped attendance some. How do you sort of understand the challenges with attendance for Florida teams?
I don't know that there's a good answer to that question. There's more to do in Florida than there are in most of the other major venues. I say more to do because there's more to do outside. You can spend more time outside in good weather in Florida than other venues. So that when it came time to go to a ball game, I could do that or go to the beach, or I could do that or participate in some water sport. I could go sailing, I could go windsurfing, I could go, and these other numerous things. And I think that played a part. But what also played a part was I'm not sure that our initial ownership, and I think this is something that has been learned by our current ownership, understood the value of relating to the community. I call it emotional infrastructure.
Yeah.
You see these teams, and Pittsburgh is a good idea. Green Bay is another example of communities that really identify with their professional team. Green Bay with the Packers and Pittsburgh with the Steelers principally. And that emotional infrastructure becomes a part of identity. Hemingway wrote a wonderful book called A Farewell to Arms about man's need to identify, in his case, with a country, with an ambulance corps, with an army, and finally with a woman, and losing them all. And so I listened to the mayor of St. Louis one night when they had lost the Rams that went to Arizona. And the mayor of St. Louis was telling me that how can we permit these owners to come in and to gut the emotional infrastructure of a community by moving a team? Because people related and were very much attached to the local team, as they are the St. Louis Cardinals. And so when you have ownership that doesn't recognize the need to develop that rapport between the team organization, the team itself, and the local community, I think you have a void there which is extremely important.
And obviously different owners have different relationships with their teams based in their total portfolio and their lives and their station and their place in their lives. We see that with Jeff Vinnick moving away to spend more time with his family. Certainly the executive team at the Rays live, eat, sleep, and breathe St. Petersburg. Matt Silver and Brian Auld, fought vigorously to stay here. Also, I would say, just being Florida a land of transplants, at least in these generations, that's a little bit of a vote against, which is why you see so many of the opposing team's colors at when the teams come to town. But ideally, as more generations are born here, that those roots and that history take hold, and maybe a little more of that emotional infrastructure, which is often built in childhood, right? That's when you really fall in love with the game and the players and idolize them, and then remember them as you age.
Well, I think you've broken the code.
Just wait it out.
You've got it.
Yeah.
I would agree.
So, emotional infrastructure aside, there's some emotional infrastructure in any city that has a team. But looking through the lens of being a mayor of a city that ultimately had a team versus being a mayor of a city that didn't, or a city that lost a team, where does that sort of does that move a city up the pecking order to have a pro team in a significant way?
I'm not sure what you mean by pecking order, but let's talk about economics for a minute. I started some time ago by commenting to the fact that statistics tell us that healthy downtowns contribute 15 to 20% to the tax base. And St. Petersburg was contributing in those years, in the late 80s, 1% to the tax base. From an economic standpoint, that means if you're a citizen of St. Petersburg, your children, as they come up, don't have the same opportunities for employment.
Right.
And so you wanted your children to live in St. Petersburg, but they couldn't afford to.
Right.
They wound up going to Atlanta. They wound up going to Charlotte. They wound up going to Houston and to places other than St. Petersburg because there weren't any jobs.
Right.
And so in order to generate some economic vitality in a community, baseball was very, very important in that respect. Right. Because it puts you on the front pages of much of the media, and the team had some early good fortune in that it was a credible team. It wasn't an afterthought, and that generated goodwill for the community and interest in the community, so that we began to build an economic structure which enabled your children and my children to return to St. Petersburg and be able to earn a living.
And that is direct and indirect contribution. So, as you said earlier, really that's the big boost to that is quality of life, and to some extent attention, because like you said, the team now, you're in the media, people are thinking about where to go, where to vacation. Vacation often ends to moving places. Vacations by CEOs sometimes end in companies coming here. Having a team, having the energy that the team generates, all feeds to that machine of gravity that pulls people in to get them to bring their families, their businesses, and their money here.
That's the bottom line for the need to improve the quality of life in your town. You got to be able to make a living, bottom line.
Makes a lot of sense. So as you went through the building process and left office without a team, what was that sort of a journey like for you as a leader? Didn't move on to.
Well, obviously we hadn't gotten the work done, but we came powerfully close, for instance, to having the Chicago White Sox agree to move their franchise here. At the 11th hour and 59th minute, the legislature of Illinois agreed to fund a new stadium for the White Sox, or they'd have been gone. Jerry Reinsdorf, he could see the handwriting on the wall, and he was tired of a substandard stadium. And with this, he had a new stadium, fully air conditioned, rainproof, and he was ready to go.
Has anything leaked out about those? That 5 minutes they extended the vote, and the governor, basically twisting some arms. Have you ever heard how that went in the last few moments?
Not from any credible source.
Okay.
I think what I heard would have been heard generally by the public.
Right.
And it was no surprise in one respect, because Illinois politics
Sure.
have a reputation for doing the underhanded or the sleight of hand.
But at the very least, the general wisdom is that it validated St. Pete. Obviously, having the stadium validated St. Pete plenty, but having someone, as historically connected to the game as the White Sox and the Reinsdorf family, saying, "Yeah, this is we'll leave Chicago to go to this place." That's a big deal, because that means as they look at expansions or ultimately what happened, or even other teams, that made it an easier destination to sell than maybe a place that didn't have.
Absolutely. St. Petersburg would not have been in the running without its decision to build a stadium.
Yeah.
We were a small market. Baseball typically looks for a larger market.
Yep.
And would have, in our case, certainly places like Miami, which got one, and Charlotte as an example. And of course, Las Vegas has been in the running for ages, but there are other places as well that would have trumped us had we not had a stadium.
That's fair. Let's look a little bit about how you've experienced the last, few years, the Kreisman negotiations, the restart, and ultimately the deal that we've ended up with here. What has been your take on that process, and how do you think we ended up?
I haven't been a part, of course, of City Hall for a number of years now, and I know that Kreisman attempted to accomplish what Ken Welch apparently has been able to, and he was not able to. Kreisman said to me one time, I thought was interesting, he said, "I'm Yiddish, they're Yiddish, and I'm going to use that for all it's worth."
Interesting. All right.
But alas, it didn't turn out, and it was time. And what became the moment of truth was the fact that their lease on this facility was up in 2007, right. 2027. So they had to fish or cut bait at some point. And as they began to prosper, as they began to, I think, more readily assimilate themselves into the community, and I say into the St. Pete community, because there was a number of years when we were pariahs insofar as the ownership was concerned. Their notion was the market was in Tampa, the ball team should be in Tampa, and St. Pete can take a walk.
Yeah.
So it wasn't until I think that Stu Sternberg finally had an epiphany and said, maybe this isn't so bad. And so he came around, and with favorable negotiations, he has apparently been willing to put his name on the dotted line and move forward.
Yeah. And not to compare Tampa and St. Pete, but it is fair to say that, and it's been a long going one, but the word Renaissance, almost maybe the never-ending Renaissance, has been happening in St. Pete for a while, and certainly the development that will spring up around the ballpark in these 80-some acres, is going to be a boost and a really progressive push towards elevating the city even further.
Well, it certainly has an opportunity to make a very bold statement to our city if it is developed correctly. And I'm not a knowledgeable author of developing something correctly, but I have my own ideas, and I think that to a great degree we're following along an appropriate line to make a very bold statement that will benefit the community and both from a standpoint of developing further emotional infrastructure and jobs and interest and quality of life.
I love that, and highlight the emotional infrastructure, because as far as as someone who's passionate about placemaking, I think that's a really often overlooked aspect of why we do the stuff we do. So
I agree.
Thank you for bringing that to the
Yes.
forefront. Former Mayor Bob Ulrich, I've appreciated you sharing your wisdom and sitting in the house that you had a big part in building. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Well, it's a pleasure to have chatted about it and retrieved some of that nostalgia that was about when this was being put together.